We would like to find the image of the line imaginary part of z equals -2 under the mapping f of z equals z squared. So imaginary part of z is equal to -2. So that would be this line here, this horizontal line that goes through the number -2i in the z-plane. And for this problem, we're going to consider the image plane. We're going to consider w equals z squared. So the variable z is x plus iy. So this is an x-axis and this is an iy-axis. And we're going to put the image in the w plane with and we're going to say w is equal to u plus iv. So we'll have a u-axis and an iv-axis. So a real and an imaginary axis in the w plane. So f of z equals, so w equals z squared, which is x plus iy, quantity squared. And if we square this out, we'll get x squared. And then squaring this one will give us minus y squared. And then the cross term will give us xy. And there's two of those, so 2i xy. So I times 2xy. So the real part of z squared is x squared minus y squared. And the imaginary part of z squared is 2xy. And this is the variable w, so this is u plus iv, which means that u, the real part, is equal to x squared minus y squared, and v, the imaginary part, is 2xy. Now this line that we're considering here, the imaginary part of z, well, the imaginary part of z is y. So we're looking at the line y equals -2. So we'll just substitute -2 in here for y. So we'll substitute y equals -2. And what we'll get is u is equal to x squared minus 4. And v is equal to -4x. So we would like to find a relationship between u and v. So we'll eliminate the x. This equation gives us x is equal to -v over 4. And we'll substitute that in here. So u is equal to -v over 4, quantity squared, minus 4. And we can simplify that to u equals v squared over 16 minus 4. And this is going to be a parabola in the uv plane. And it's going to open in the direction of, it's going to open to the right. It's going to open to the right. If you switch the u and the v, it would open up. But this one opens right. It's kind of like the parabola x equals y squared in the xy plane. That opens to the right. So this one opens right. So the image is going to be some parabola here in the w plane that opens to the right. And let's look at some details here. Let's find the intercepts. If v is equal to 0, then that means that u is equal to -4. So that means that we have this point here, -4 is on the parabola. And if u is equal to 0, then that means that v squared over 16 minus 4 is equal to 0. And solving for v will give us v squared over 16 equals 4. V squared equals 16 times 4, which is 64. And so finally v equals plus or minus 8. So we have up here, maybe a little off scale, 8i, and we have down here negative 8i, and the parabola is symmetric with respect to the u-axis. A positive or a negative v leads to the same thing, so it's a parabola that opens right that is symmetric with respect to the u-axis. So this is the vertex here, and the parabola goes like this. So the image of this line is this parabola. More specifically, the point negative 2i here on the imaginary axis, when we square that, negative 2i quantity squared is negative 4. So this point does map to this point here. And then if we consider a couple of other points on this line here, another natural point to consider is the point at the 45-degree mark, and that would be the point 2 minus 2i. And if we square that one, 2 minus 2i, if we square that, we get 4 from squaring this. Then we have to square this one, and we get 4 times minus 1, we get minus 4, and then we get the cross term, 2 times negative 2i is negative 4i, and we get 2 of those, so negative 8i. And the 4's cancel, and this is negative 8i. So this point, which I'll put in red, gets mapped to this point, which is telling us that this half of the ray is getting mapped to this half of the parabola. And similarly, if we consider the point over here, similarly the 45-degree point, which would be negative 2 minus 2i, if we square that, then we will get the same 4 minus 4 here. This one squared is 4, this one squared is negative 4, and then we'll get plus, and negative 2 times negative 2i is 4i, and then double that, so 8i. So this point here, which we'll put in green, this point, negative 2 minus 2i, will get mapped to 8i. So this half of the ray will get mapped to the upper half of the parabola. So the image of the line, y equals negative 2, under the squaring mapping, is a parabola.